You face challenges that seem insurmountable, and every setback makes you question whether you have what it takes to overcome them. Each defeat chips away at your confidence, leaving you wondering if you're destined to be conquered by life's battles rather than conquering them yourself. I am Miyamoto Musashi, and I fought over 60 duels without a single defeat, mastering the way of the sword through decades of relentless training and combat. What I discovered about building an undefeated warrior mindset will transform how you approach every challenge in your life, giving you the mental fortitude to emerge victorious even when the odds are stacked against you. The same principles that kept me undefeated on ancient battlefields can keep you undefeated in modern life's arena. Whether you're facing career obstacles or personal struggles, the warrior's path I'll share transcends time and circumstance. Like this video, subscribe for more warrior wisdom, and comment below where you're watching from. I want to know which. Corners of the world are ready to forge an undefeated spirit. I was not born a warrior. This truth may surprise you, but it is essential you understand it. I came into this world as Shinmen Takezo, the son of a minor samurai who died when I was barely old enough to hold a sword. What shaped me into the undefeated warrior known as Miyamoto Musashi was not noble birth or inherited skill. It was the forge of hardship, failure, and relentless self-creation. In my early years, I was wild, undisciplined, a ronin with more anger than wisdom. I fought not from strategy but from rage, not from principle but from pride. My father's broken katana, which I kept even after forging my own swords, reminds me daily of those chaotic beginnings. The blade had snapped during his final battle, and for years I saw it as a symbol of weakness, of failure. I was wrong. That broken sword became my greatest teacher. It showed me that a warrior's true weapon is never the steel in his hand, but the steel in his spirit. My father had fought bravely with a broken blade, choosing to continue the fight rather than surrender. In that choice, he demonstrated the essence of the warrior's way, not the perfection of tools, but the perfection of will. My first real defeat came when I was 16, facing a seasoned warrior who should have been no match for my youthful strength and speed. Yet he destroyed me not through superior technique, but through superior mind. He saw my anger, my impatience, my need to prove myself, and he used these weaknesses against me. As I lay bleeding in the dirt, I realized that I had been fighting like a beast, not a warrior. That moment of crushing defeat became my moment of awakening. I understood that battles are won long before the first blow is struck. They are won in the mind, in the preparation, in the understanding of self and circumstance. Physical strength, sword skill, even courage, these are merely tools. The true warrior shapes these tools with the power of an undefeated mind. I began to study not just swordsmanship, but everything that could make me stronger. I learned carpentry to understand precision and patience. I studied poetry to grasp the rhythm and timing that governs all things. I practiced painting to develop the eye that sees patterns and possibilities. Each discipline taught me something essential about the warrior's path. The transformation was not quick or easy. I spent years in the mountains, training alone, facing my demons in the silence of isolation. I fought wild boars with wooden swords, meditated under waterfalls until my body went numb, and pushed myself beyond every limit I thought I had. But, more importantly, I fought the enemy within, my pride, my fear, my need for others' approval. When I finally emerged from those mountains and began my Mushashugyo, my warrior's pilgrimage, I was no longer the angry young ronin who had been defeated so easily. I had forged myself into something new, a warrior whose strength came not from what he could destroy, but from what he could never be destroyed by. This is what you must understand about building the mindset of an undefeated warrior. It is not about becoming invincible in battle. It is about becoming unconquerable in spirit. The warrior who cannot be defeated is not the one who never falls, but the one who rises from every fall stronger than before. The first and most crucial principle of the undefeated warrior is this: you must know yourself completely, without illusion, without mercy, without the comfortable lies that most people tell themselves to sleep peacefully at night. This knowledge is not pleasant. It is necessary. I keep beside my bedroll a simple bronze mirror, polished to perfect clarity, not for vanity but for truth. Each morning before I practice, each evening before I rest, I look into this mirror and ask myself the hardest questions a warrior can face. What did I do today from strength, and what did I do from weakness? Where did I act from wisdom, and where did I act from fear? What lies am I telling myself about my capabilities, my motivations, my progress on the way? Most people avoid such brutal self-examination. They prefer to see themselves as heroes in their own stories, victims of circumstances beyond their control, or blessed with talents they have never truly tested. The warrior cannot afford such luxury. In combat, self-deception kills. In life, it cripples every chance for real growth. When I was young and foolish, I believed I was naturally gifted with the sword. I had won several early duels against inferior opponents, and I allowed these small victories to inflate my sense of ability. I told myself I was destined for greatness, that my success came from some inherent superiority. This delusion nearly destroyed me. It was only when I began the practice of ruthless self-examination that I discovered the truth. I was not naturally gifted. I was naturally determined. My early victories had come not from skill, but from a willingness to endure more pain, to risk more, to push harder than my opponents expected. This was a strength, but recognizing it accurately allowed me to build upon it properly rather than rest upon false laurels. The mirror taught me to see my weaknesses as clearly as my strengths. I learned that I fought too aggressively when angry, that I became predictable when frustrated, that my pride could be used against me by clever opponents. These discoveries stung my ego, but they saved my life countless times. You cannot defend against weaknesses you refuse to acknowledge, but self-knowledge goes deeper than recognizing tactical flaws. The warrior must understand the fundamental drives that move him, the fears that constrain him, the dreams that motivate him. Why do you seek to become undefeated? Is it for honor, for security, for revenge, for the joy of mastery itself? Each motivation leads down a different path, and you must know which path you walk. I discovered that my deepest drive was not the desire to win, but the desire to become worthy of my father's sacrifice. This understanding transformed my approach to training and combat. I was not fighting to prove my superiority over others. I was fighting to prove my fidelity to something greater than myself. This shift in self-understanding made me immeasurably stronger. The practice of complete self-knowledge requires daily discipline. Each night I review the day's actions and examine them without favor. Did I act from the principles I claimed to follow, or did I compromise them for convenience? Did I face my challenges with the courage of a warrior, or did I find clever ways to avoid real tests? Was I honest in my dealings, or did I shade the truth to serve my interests? This practice is uncomfortable because it forces you to confront the gap between who you are and who you pretend to be. Most people cannot bear this confrontation, so they avoid self-examination altogether. They prefer the comfortable darkness of ignorance to the harsh light of truth. But the warrior chooses truth, no matter how painful, because only truth leads to real strength. When you know yourself completely, your strengths to build upon, your weaknesses to guard against, your motivations to channel properly, you become nearly impossible to defeat. Your enemies cannot use your blind spots against you because you have no blind spots. They cannot manipulate your fears because you have faced and understood them. They cannot surprise you with challenges you have not already prepared for in your mind. This is why self-knowledge is the foundation of all warrior development. Everything else, skill, strategy, courage, discipline, builds upon this base. Without it, you are fighting blind, no matter how keen your physical sight may be. The second principle that shaped my undefeated path seems paradoxical to most minds. Embrace the void, find strength in emptiness, discover power in nothingness. Yet this principle, perhaps more than any other, separates the true warrior from the mere fighter. I carry with me an empty scabbard, a sheath without a sword. To the uninitiated, this appears useless, even foolish. What purpose does a scabbard serve without a blade to hold? But this empty scabbard teaches the profound lesson that potential often exceeds possession, that what might be holds more power than what is. When I first understood this principle, I was preparing for what would become my most famous duel against Sasaki Kojiro on Ganryu Island. Kojiro was renowned for his technique with the longsword, his movements precise and deadly. Everyone expected me to meet his perfection with perfection of my own, his technique with superior technique. Instead, I chose to meet his fullness with emptiness. I arrived late to our duel, carrying not a forged steel blade, but a wooden sword I had carved from an oar during the boat journey to the island. Kojiro's rage at my apparent disrespect, his confusion at my unconventional weapon, his disrupted expectations, these became my greatest advantages. While he fought with predetermined patterns, I fought from the void of infinite possibility. The void is not nothingness in the sense of absence. It is nothingness in the sense of unlimited potential. When your mind is empty of preconceptions, it can fill with exactly what the moment requires. When your strategy is not locked into rigid plans, it can adapt to any circumstance. When your identity is not trapped in fixed ideas about who you are, you can become whoever you need to be. Most warriors train to eliminate uncertainty, to prepare for every possible scenario, to have an answer for every attack. This approach has value, but it also has limitations. No matter how thoroughly you prepare, life will present you with situations you have never encountered. The warrior who has only prepared responses will be defeated by the truly unexpected. The warrior who has prepared to respond from emptiness can handle anything. I learned to cultivate void mind through meditation, but not the passive meditation of monks seeking peace. I practiced the active meditation of the warrior seeking power. I would sit in perfect stillness, yet remain alert to every sound, every movement of air, every subtle change in my environment. I trained my mind to be simultaneously empty and aware, receptive and ready. In combat, void mind manifests as the ability to see openings that do not yet exist, to sense attacks before they are launched, to respond to your opponent's intention rather than his action. When your mind is clear of its own agenda, it becomes a perfect mirror for your opponent's mind. You can read him like written text, because you are not distracted by your own mental noise, but embracing the void extends far beyond combat. In daily life, void mind allows you to approach each situation fresh, unencumbered by past failures or future anxieties. When you meet a challenge with an empty mind, you can perceive solutions that a cluttered mind would never see. When you encounter setbacks without predetermined ideas about what they mean, you can find opportunities that others miss entirely. The empty scabbard reminds me that true power lies not in what I carry, but in my capacity to carry anything. The warrior who depends on specific weapons, techniques, or circumstances is vulnerable when those elements are unavailable. The warrior who has learned to fight from emptiness can create weapons from anything, can adapt any technique to any situation, can find strength in any circumstance. This is perhaps the most difficult principle for modern minds to grasp, because we are taught that success comes from accumulation, more knowledge, more skills, more resources, more preparation. The warrior understands that beyond a certain point, accumulation becomes burden. The mind stuffed with techniques becomes slow to adapt. The strategy planned in excessive detail becomes brittle when reality differs from expectation. Embracing the void requires tremendous courage because it means releasing your attachment to familiar patterns, to proven methods, to the comfortable illusion of control. You must learn to trust in your ability to respond appropriately from emptiness rather than relying on predetermined responses from fullness. When you master this principle, you become like water that takes the shape of any container yet retains its essential nature. You can adapt to any circumstance while remaining true to your warrior core. You become undefeatable not because you are prepared for everything, but because you are prepared for anything. The third principle that governs the undefeated warrior's path is the mastery of timing, understanding that there is a rhythm to all things, and the warrior who moves in harmony with this rhythm becomes nearly invincible. Poor timing transforms strength into weakness, while perfect timing transforms even small actions into overwhelming force. I keep with me a simple sundial, not to mark the hours of day and night, but to remind myself that time is not a river flowing at constant speed. It is an ocean with currents, eddies, and tides. The warrior must learn to read these temporal currents as carefully as a sailor reads wind and weather. In my youth, I believed that speed was everything. I trained to strike faster, move quicker, react more rapidly than any opponent. This served me well against lesser warriors, but when I faced truly skilled enemies, I discovered that speed without timing is merely frantic motion. A perfectly timed slow strike defeats a poorly timed fast one every time. The lesson came to me during a duel with a master of the Yagyu school. He was older, his reflexes slower than mine, yet he seemed to anticipate my every move. No matter how quickly I attacked, he was already prepared for my assault. Finally, I realized what was happening. He was not reacting to my attacks. He was reading the rhythm of my breathing, my stance, my intention. He moved not after I acted, but as. The potential for my action was forming in my mind. That defeat taught me to study timing as carefully as I studied swordsmanship. I began to observe the rhythms in everything around me, the flight patterns of birds, the growth cycles of plants, the ebb and flow of conversations. I learned that every opponent, every situation, every challenge has its own natural rhythm, and the wise warrior learns to synchronize with these rhythms rather than fight against them. In combat, timing manifests in many forms. There is the timing of attack, striking not when your opponent is strongest, but in the brief moment when his strength transitions to weakness. There is the timing of defense, moving not when the blow falls, but in the instant before it gains momentum. There is the timing of distance, being close when closeness serves you, far when distance protects you, always at the perfect range for your purpose. But perhaps most crucial is the timing of stillness, knowing when not to act at all. I have won many duels by doing nothing at precisely the right moment, allowing my opponent's aggression to create the opening I needed. Impatient warriors defeat themselves by acting when they should wait, by forcing action when acceptance would serve them better. The sundial teaches me that there are seasons in conflict just as there are seasons in nature. There is a time for aggressive advance and a time for strategic retreat. There is a time for direct confrontation and a time for indirect approach. There is a time for speed and a time for patience. The warrior who mistakes these seasons fights, not just his opponent, but the natural order itself. Learning proper timing requires developing what I call rhythm sense, the ability to feel the pulse that underlies all action. This comes through practice, through observation, through countless hours of careful attention to the subtle cues that precede all movement. You must learn to sense when your opponent is about to shift his weight, when he is taking a deeper breath, before attacking, when his attention wavers for a crucial instant. In life beyond combat, timing is equally essential. The same business proposal that fails in winter might succeed brilliantly in spring, not because the proposal changes, but because the circumstances that receive it have shifted. The same approach to a relationship that creates conflict during stress might create deep connection during calm. I have seen brilliant warriors fail because they attempted the right action at the wrong time. I have seen mediocre warriors succeed because they understood timing better than technique. The warrior who masters timing can make every action count for maximum effect with minimum effort. This mastery comes through patient observation and practice. You must learn to feel the natural pauses in conversation, the moments when resistance lessens, the instants when opportunity opens. You must develop the discipline to wait for these moments rather than forcing action when the timing is wrong. When you align your actions with natural timing, you move with the power of the universe itself. Your strikes land when your opponent is most vulnerable. Your words reach others when they are most receptive. Your efforts yield maximum results because you are working with the flow of circumstances rather than against it. The warrior who has mastered timing appears to others almost supernatural in his effectiveness. In truth, he has simply learned to dance with the rhythm that governs all things rather than struggling against it in ignorant opposition. The fourth principle of the undefeated warrior is adaptation. The ability to change your approach without changing your purpose, to flow around obstacles rather than break yourself against them. This lesson came to me through years of observing water, and I carry with me a smooth river stone that reminds me of water's persistent power. This stone was once part of a mighty boulder, angular and unyielding. The river that shaped it was not stronger than the rock. Water is soft, the rock is hard. Yet over countless years, the gentle persistence of flowing water transformed this jagged obstacle into something smooth and beautiful. The water did not attack the rock with force. It simply flowed around it, over it, through every crack and crevice until the rock itself was transformed. When I was young, I fought like fire, intense, aggressive, consuming everything in my path. I believed that strength meant overwhelming opposition, that the warrior's way was to smash through every barrier with superior force. This approach served me against weak opponents, but when I encountered truly formidable challenges, my rigid fire met immovable mountains, and I was the one who broke. The turning point came during a period when I faced 3 consecutive defeats. Each time I had approached the challenge with the same methods that had brought me previous victories. Each time I was defeated, not because my opponents were necessarily superior warriors, but because they presented problems that my fixed approach could not solve. I was like a master of the straight sword facing an expert with a curved blade. My technique was perfect, but it was perfectly wrong for the situation. During my recovery from these defeats, I spent months beside a mountain stream, studying how water moves. I watched it encounter every conceivable obstacle: rocks, fallen trees, changes in elevation, seasonal variations in volume. Never once did the water stop flowing toward its destination. When it met a boulder, it flowed around. When it encountered a cliff, it found a way down. When it faced a dam, it gathered strength until it could flow over or through. Most importantly, I noticed that water never fights against its obstacles in the way that fire fights against fuel. Water does not try to convince the rock to move. It does not exhaust itself in direct assault. Instead, it finds the path of least resistance while maintaining relentless pressure toward its goal. It adapts its form to every circumstance while never abandoning its essential nature. This observation revolutionized my understanding of the warrior's path. True strength is not rigidity. It is flexibility, combined with unshakable purpose. The undefeated warrior learns to bend without breaking, to yield without surrendering, to change tactics without abandoning strategy. In combat, this meant developing not just one fighting style, but the ability to shift between many styles as circumstances demanded. Against an aggressive opponent, I learned to become defensive and patient. Against a defensive opponent, I learned to apply steady pressure. Against a technical fighter, I became creative and unpredictable. Against a wild fighter, I became precise. and controlled. Like water taking the shape of its container, I learned to take the fighting shape that best suited each unique challenge. But adaptation goes deeper than merely changing techniques. It requires changing your very identity in response to circumstances while maintaining your core principles. Sometimes the situation calls for you to be the humble student, sometimes the confident master, sometimes the patient strategist, sometimes the bold risk-taker. The warrior learns to wear these different aspects of self as naturally as changing clothes without losing sight of his fundamental nature. The river stone teaches me that this kind of adaptation requires both persistence and patience. Water does not reshape stone in a day, a month, or even a year. It works continuously, consistently, without drama or frustration. Similarly, the warrior who seeks to overcome truly significant obstacles must be prepared for a long campaign of steady pressure and constant adaptation. I have seen many warriors fail because they could not adapt their methods to new circumstances. They became masters of one approach and then tried to apply that same approach to every challenge they encountered. When their favorite technique failed, they had no alternatives. When their preferred strategy proved inadequate, they had no backup plans. The adaptive warrior, by contrast, approaches each new challenge with fresh eyes and an open mind. He asks not, "How can I apply my usual methods here?" but "What does this specific situation require?" He is willing to appear weak if appearing weak serves his purpose. He is willing to retreat if retreating leads to ultimate victory. He is willing to change everything about his approach except his commitment to winning. This flexibility makes the adaptive warrior nearly impossible to defeat because he presents no fixed target for his enemies to attack. Just when they think they understand his methods, he changes them. Just when they prepare for one approach, he adopts another. Like trying to strike flowing water with a sword, attacking the adaptive warrior results only in striking empty space. The fifth principle that governs the undefeated warrior is decisive action, the ability to commit completely to your chosen course, to strike with the full force of your being when the moment calls for it. I carry with me a piece of lightning-carved wood, split by a single bolt from the sky, which reminds me that sometimes the universe itself demonstrates the power of singular, decisive force. This charred wood came from a tree that stood for centuries, weathering countless storms, bending, with winds that would have felled lesser trees. Yet one night, lightning struck with such precise and concentrated power that it split the mighty trunk from crown to root in a single instant. The lightning did not hesitate, did not strike partially, did not test the tree's resistance with gentle probes. It committed everything to one perfect moment of decisive action. When I was learning the warrior's way, I struggled with this principle more than any other. I understood patience. I grasped adaptation. I could perceive timing. But when the moment came to act decisively, I often found myself caught between choices, paralyzed by the fear of committing to the wrong course. This hesitation nearly cost me my life more than once. The lesson came during a duel with a warrior whose reputation for swift kills was legendary. I had studied his methods, prepared my defenses, planned my attacks. When we faced each other, I saw the opening I needed, a brief moment when his guard dropped slightly as he shifted stance. But instead of striking immediately with full commitment, I hesitated, testing the opening with a half-hearted probe. In that instant of hesitation, he recovered and launched a counterattack that left me wounded and barely alive. As I lay recovering from my injuries, I realized the fatal flaw in my approach. I had been trying to fight safely, to minimize risk, by never fully committing to any action. But the warrior's path offers no safety, only the choice between decisive action and inevitable defeat. Half measures in combat are not cautious, they are suicidal. From that day forward, I trained myself to recognize the moments that demand complete commitment. These moments come rarely, but when they arrive, the warrior must be ready to stake everything on a single action. Like lightning gathering all the sky's energy into one overwhelming bolt, the warrior must learn to gather all his power, physical, mental, and spiritual, into moments of decisive strike. This does not mean reckless aggression or thoughtless violence. Decisive action must be preceded by careful observation, patient preparation, and perfect timing. The lightning appears to strike randomly, but it follows precise laws of nature, building pressure until release becomes inevitable. Similarly, the warrior's decisive action emerges from a foundation of knowledge, preparation, and situational awareness. I learned to cultivate what I call commitment mind, the mental state that makes hesitation impossible once the decision is made. This requires training yourself to analyze thoroughly before acting, but once analysis is complete, to execute without reservation or second guessing. The time for doubt is before the decision, not during its execution. In practice, this meant learning to recognize three distinct phases in any challenging situation: preparation, decision, and execution. During preparation, I allowed myself to consider every option, to doubt, to question, to gather information. During the decision phase, I weighed all factors and committed to a course of action. But once execution began, all doubt disappeared. I became like an arrow released from the bow, entirely focused on reaching the target, incapable of changing direction. The lightning carved wood teaches me that decisive action requires accepting risk. Lightning does not calculate the probability of success before striking. It strikes when conditions align properly, regardless of obstacles. The warrior who waits for guaranteed success will wait forever. The warrior who demands perfect conditions will never find them. Decisive action means accepting uncertainty while committing fully to your chosen path. I have observed that most people fail not because they choose wrong, but because they fail to choose at all. They remain trapped in endless analysis, forever preparing, but never acting. Others fail because they act too quickly, without proper preparation or consideration. The undefeated warrior finds the perfect balance, thorough preparation followed by unhesitating execution. This principle extends far beyond combat into every aspect of life. In relationships, decisive action means committing fully to those you choose to love or serve. In pursuits, it means focusing your energy completely on goals you have selected as worthy. In challenges, it means facing them with your entire being, rather than holding back portions of yourself in reserve. When you master decisive action, you become a force of nature. Like lightning, your strikes carry such concentrated power that they overwhelm obstacles that could resist lesser efforts. Like lightning, you inspire both respect and fear in those who witness your commitment. Like lightning, you achieve results that seem impossible to those who have never learned to focus their full power into single moments. The warrior who strikes decisively may sometimes fail, but the warrior who strikes half-heartedly always fails. Better to commit fully and be wrong than to hedge your commitment and be weak. Strength of action can overcome errors of judgment, but no amount of judgment can overcome weakness of action. The sixth principle that shaped my path to becoming undefeated is relentless discipline, the daily practice of choosing the harder path when easier alternatives beckon. I carry with me 2 heavy training stones, worn smooth by years of handling, which remind me that strength is not built in moments of inspiration, but in countless moments of quiet persistence. These stones were not chosen for their beauty or significance. They were selected purely for their weight and the discomfort they caused. Each morning for years, I carried them during my practice, adding burden to every movement, making every technique more difficult to execute. They taught me that the warrior's development comes not from seeking comfort, but from embracing necessary discomfort. In my youth, I believed that discipline meant forcing myself to practice when I did not want to practice, to train when I preferred to rest. This understanding was not wrong, but it was incomplete. True discipline goes deeper than overcoming laziness. It is the systematic cultivation of character through countless small choices that compound into extraordinary capability. The revelation came to me during a period when I had grown confident in my abilities. I had won several important duels, my reputation was spreading, and I found myself becoming comfortable with my level of skill. Without conscious decision, I began to ease the intensity of my training. I still practiced daily, but I chose easier exercises, reduced the duration of difficult sessions, and allowed myself small compromises that seemed insignificant at the time. This gradual softening went unnoticed until I faced an opponent whose discipline had not wavered. He was not more naturally talented than I, nor did he possess superior techniques. But while I had been allowing tiny compromises, he had been maintaining perfect standards. The difference was subtle, but decisive. His technique was slightly sharper, his endurance slightly greater, his focus slightly more intense. These small margins combined to create a substantial advantage. That near defeat taught me that discipline is not a mountain you climb once, but a path you walk daily. The warrior who reaches a certain level and then maintains it will inevitably be surpassed by the warrior who continues climbing. There is no plateau in the warrior's development. You are either advancing or declining, strengthening or weakening. The training stones became my teachers in understanding how discipline actually works. Each day they made my practice more difficult, but this difficulty was not punishment, it was investment. By training with extra weight, I developed strength that served me when fighting without that burden. By practicing under imposed hardship, I prepared myself for the unexpected hardships that combat would bring. But the deeper lesson was about the accumulation of small efforts. Each individual session with the stones seemed to produce no visible improvement. I was not dramatically stronger after one day, 1 week, or even 1 month. Yet over time, the accumulated effect of countless small efforts created capabilities I could never have developed through sporadic, intense training. This taught me that discipline is not about spectacular acts of willpower, but about consistent application of reasonable standards. The warrior who attempts to transform himself overnight through extreme measures will exhaust his willpower and abandon his efforts. The warrior who commits to small, sustainable improvements every day will achieve transformations that seem miraculous to others. I learned to structure my discipline around daily non-negotiables, practices I would complete regardless of circumstances, weather, mood, or external pressures. These included physical training, meditation, skill practice, and study. Not because every day required maximum effort, but because consistency of practice creates mental patterns that serve the warrior in crisis. The stones also taught me that true discipline extends beyond formal training into every moment of daily life. How you wake in the morning, how you speak to others, how you handle frustration, how you respond to unexpected challenges, these seemingly small choices either strengthen or weaken your warrior character. The disciplined warrior treats every interaction as practice for the qualities he seeks to develop. Most people misunderstand discipline as self-punishment or rigid adherence to arbitrary rules. They see it as the enemy of freedom, creativity, and spontaneity. The warrior understands that discipline is actually the foundation of all real freedom. The disciplined warrior has trained his body and mind to respond reliably to his will, giving him capabilities that undisciplined people can only dream of possessing. When facing challenges, the disciplined warrior does not have to wonder whether he has the strength to persevere. His daily practice has already proven his capability. He does not have to hope that he will make good decisions under pressure. His habitual choices have already established his character. He does not have to wish for courage in crisis. His consistent practice of facing smaller difficulties has prepared him for larger ones. The training stones remind me that discipline is ultimately about respect. Respect for your goals, respect for your potential, respect for those who depend on you. When you commit to disciplined practice, you honor the belief that your development matters, that your capabilities are worth the investment of effort, that your character deserves cultivation. This principle creates a compound effect that grows, stronger over time. Each disciplined choice makes the next one easier. Each maintained standard raises your baseline expectations. Each completed commitment strengthens your confidence in your ability to honor future commitments. The seventh principle that every undefeated warrior must master is perhaps the most misunderstood. You must learn to master fear and transform it into power. I keep with me a fearsome demon mask, carved by a master craftsman, which reminds me that fear is not the enemy of courage. It is courage's raw material. This mask was given to me by an old warrior who had seen more battles than most men see sunrises. Its twisted features and terrible expression were designed to strike fear into enemies, but he told me its true purpose was different. "Wear this," he said, "until you understand that the face of fear belongs not to your enemies, but to yourself. Only when you can look at your own terror without flinching will you be ready to face any opponent." For months I could barely stand to look at the mask. Its grotesque features seemed to mirror every doubt, every anxiety, every moment of cowardice I had ever experienced. But gradually I began to understand what the old warrior meant. The mask was not showing me something foreign and external. It was showing me the face I wore whenever fear controlled my actions. In my early years as a warrior, I believed that courage meant the absence of fear. I thought that brave warriors simply did not feel the trembling, the quickened heartbeat, the cold sweat that preceded dangerous encounters. When I experienced these sensations, I interpreted them as evidence of my weakness, proof that I was not truly cut out for the warrior's path. This misunderstanding nearly destroyed my development. I spent enormous energy trying to eliminate fear rather than learning to work with it. I attempted to suppress the natural warnings my body gave me, to ignore the intelligence that fear provides about genuine dangers. In doing so, I made myself both more fearful and less effective. The transformation came during a duel where my opponent was not just skilled, but genuinely murderous. Unlike previous encounters where defeat meant shame, this battle would end in death for one of us. As we faced each other, I felt terror unlike anything I had previously experienced. My hands shook, my vision narrowed, my breathing became rapid and shallow. But instead of fighting these sensations, I suddenly accepted them. I acknowledged to myself, yes, I am afraid. This man wants to kill me, and he has the skill to do it. Fear is the appropriate response to this situation. The moment I stopped fighting my fear, something remarkable happened. It transformed from paralyzing terror into heightened awareness. My shaking hands became sensitive to the slightest movement. My narrowed vision focused with laser intensity on my opponent's positioning. My rapid breathing flooded my body with oxygen, preparing every muscle for explosive action. The fear was still there, but it was no longer my master. It had become my tool. That day I learned that fear is information, not limitation. It tells you that something important is at stake, that danger is present, that you need to summon your full capabilities. The warrior who cannot feel fear cannot assess danger. Accurately, the warrior who feels fear but lets it control him becomes its victim. But the warrior who feels fear and harnesses its energy becomes more than he could ever be without it. The demon mask taught me to study my fears systematically. I learned to distinguish between rational fears that warned of genuine dangers and irrational fears that arose from imagination or past traumas. I discovered that most of my deepest fears were not about physical harm, but about failure, rejection, or the loss of identity I had constructed for myself. By examining these fears, honestly, I could see which ones served me and which ones enslaved me. The fear of making mistakes that paralyzed action was useless. The fear of underestimating opponents that heightened my preparation was valuable. The fear of death that made me reckless was destructive. The fear of death that made me careful was protective. I developed practices for transforming fear into focused energy. Before important encounters, I would deliberately bring my fears into consciousness rather than suppressing them. I would ask myself, what exactly am I afraid of? What does this fear tell me about the situation? How can I use this energy to perform better rather than letting it degrade my performance? This process taught me that courage is not the absence of fear. It is action in the presence of fear. The warrior who feels no fear when facing genuine danger is either deluded about the reality of his situation or damaged in his capacity to assess threats. True courage requires feeling the fear fully and choosing to act appropriately despite it. The mask also showed me that fear often reveals what matters most to us. We fear losing what we value, failing at what we care about, being rejected by those whose opinions matter to us. By understanding our fears, we can understand our deepest motivations and use them to fuel our efforts rather than sabotage them. When you master this principle, fear becomes an ally rather than an enemy. You welcome its warnings while refusing its paralysis. You use its energy while rejecting its counsel of retreat. You acknowledge its reality while denying its authority over your choices. The warrior who has learned to dance with fear rather than flee from it possesses a tremendous advantage. He can function effectively in situations that would overwhelm less developed opponents. He can access reserves of energy that fear provides while maintaining the clear thinking that panic destroys. The eighth principle that separates the undefeated warrior from the mere fighter is strategic thinking, the ability to see patterns within patterns, to think 10 moves ahead, to understand that every battle is part of a larger war. I keep with me an ancient Go board, its surface worn smooth by countless games, which has taught me more about strategy than any military treatise ever could. This board came into my possession after I defeated a master strategist who had challenged me not to a sword duel, but to a contest of minds. He believed that pure strategic thinking could overcome physical prowess, that the warrior who could see furthest ahead would always defeat the warrior who simply reacted to immediate circumstances. Our Go match lasted 3 days, and though I eventually won, the experience fundamentally changed how I approached every aspect of the warrior's path. In my younger years, I was purely tactical in my thinking. I focused on winning individual encounters, mastering specific techniques, responding to immediate challenges. Each duel was a separate event in my mind, each victory or defeat an isolated experience. This approach served me well against opponents who thought similarly, but it left me vulnerable to those who understood the larger patterns at work. The Go Master taught me that every move on the board influences every other position, that winning a local battle while losing positional advantage is ultimately self-defeating, that the expert player thinks not just about the current position, but about the position that will exist 5, 10, or 20 moves in the future. These principles, I realized, applied perfectly to the warrior's path. I began to see that my reputation was a strategic asset that could be enhanced or diminished by how I chose my battles. Fighting weak opponents might provide easy victories, but it would not build the reputation that would deter stronger enemies or attract worthy teachers. Avoiding strong opponents might preserve my record, but it would limit my development and eventually leave me vulnerable to warriors who had continued growing while I stagnated. The board taught me to think in terms of influence rather than just territory, development rather than just immediate gains, long-term position rather than just short-term advantage. I learned to ask myself not just, can I win this encounter, but how does this encounter serve my larger purposes? What position will victory or defeat leave me in? What opportunities will this create or destroy? This strategic perspective revolutionized my approach to training. Instead of simply practicing techniques that felt comfortable or impressive, I began to systematically address weaknesses that could be exploited by future opponents. Instead of focusing only on my strengths, I developed secondary capabilities that would surprise enemies who thought they understood my fighting style. I realized that information was as valuable as skill. I began to study not just swordsmanship, but the personal histories, preferences, and patterns of other renowned warriors. I learned that many fighters were creatures of habit, that they tended to repeat successful strategies, that their greatest strengths often concealed exploitable blind spots. The Go board showed me the power of what I came to call strategic patience, the willingness to accept short-term disadvantages in order to achieve superior long-term positioning. Sometimes this meant retreating from battles I could win in order to preserve energy for battles I could not afford to lose. Sometimes it meant accepting minor defeats that taught me valuable lessons about opponents I would face again. I learned to think like a chess master thinks about pieces. Each encounter, each relationship, each skill I developed had value not just in itself, but in how it combined with other elements to create overall strategic advantage. A technique that seemed insignificant might prove crucial when combined with specific timing and positioning. An alliance that appeared unimportant might become vital when circumstances shifted. The strategic warrior understands that victory is not just about what happens during combat. It begins long before the first blow is struck and continues long after the last sword is sheathed. The choice of ground, the timing of engagement, the preparation of mind and body, the cultivation of reputation, all of these are strategic elements that determine outcomes before technique becomes relevant. This principle taught me to study my enemy's strategies as carefully as their tactics. What were they trying to achieve beyond mere victory? How did they view the larger context of our conflict? What did they think they knew about me? And how could I use their assumptions against them? The warrior who understands his opponent's strategy can predict his moves even when facing unfamiliar tactics. Strategic thinking also revealed the importance of building what I call strategic depth, multiple paths to achieving your objectives, backup plans for when primary strategies fail, alternative methods for when conventional approaches prove inadequate. The tactical warrior puts all his eggs in one basket and hopes his single approach succeeds. The strategic warrior creates multiple opportunities for success and plans for various contingencies. I began to see patterns that connected seemingly unrelated events. A technique that failed against one opponent might succeed against another, who had a different background. A strategy that proved ineffective in one season might be perfect in another. A weakness that seemed insurmountable might become irrelevant if I could shift the nature of the confrontation. The board taught me that the most powerful strategic tool is the ability to shape the battlefield, to influence the conditions under which conflicts occur rather than simply adapting to conditions others have created. Sometimes this meant choosing when and where to fight. Sometimes it meant determining what resources would be available. Sometimes it meant framing the conflict in terms that favored my strengths while neutralizing my opponent's advantages. When you develop strategic thinking, you become nearly impossible to defeat because you are always fighting on multiple levels simultaneously. While your opponent focuses on immediate tactical concerns, you're positioning yourself for advantages that will emerge later. While he reacts to current circumstances, you are creating the circumstances that will determine future outcomes. The ninth principle that guides the undefeated warrior is honor through right action, understanding that true strength comes not from what you can do, but from what you choose to do when no one is watching. I carry with me an ancient scroll containing the samurai code, not as law to be followed blindly, but as a compass pointing toward the kind of warrior I aspire to become. This scroll was given to me by a Ronin who had lost everything, his lord, his lands, his position, but had never lost his integrity. He was dying of wounds received while protecting peasants from bandits, men who offered him no reward, no recognition, no benefit to his reputation. When I asked him why he had risked his life for strangers, he pointed to the scroll and said, "Honor is not something you possess. It is something you practice." In my youth, I confused honor with reputation. I thought that being honorable meant being seen as honorable by others, that the warrior's code existed to impress observers and maintain social standing. This shallow understanding led me to make choices based on appearance rather than substance, to value the opinions of others more than the voice of my own conscience. The transformation came when I witnessed a duel between two warriors, one famous for his honorable reputation, the other unknown but clearly skilled. The famous warrior, confident that his reputation would intimidate his opponent, began the match with elaborate displays of proper form and ceremonial courtesy. But when the real fighting began and he found himself losing, he abandoned all pretense of honor and resorted to deception and dirty tactics. His opponent, meanwhile, fought with simple honesty throughout. He showed no disrespect for his famous adversary, took no advantage of the man's ceremonial posturing, and when victory came, helped his defeated opponent to his feet with genuine concern for his injuries. The crowd, expecting the famous warrior to display superior honor, instead saw true honor in the actions of the unknown man. That day I learned that honor is not a costume you wear in public. It is the shape your character takes when no external rewards encourage righteousness. The truly honorable warrior acts rightly not because others are watching, but because right action has become his nature. He needs no audience for his integrity, because his integrity is not performed for others. The scroll taught me that honor provides strength rather than limiting freedom. When you commit to acting honorably regardless of circumstances, you eliminate vast amounts of internal conflict and confusion. You no longer waste energy debating whether to tell the truth, whether to keep your word, whether to help those weaker than yourself. These decisions are already made, freeing your mind to focus on more complex challenges. I discovered that living honorably actually provides tactical advantages that dishonorable warriors cannot access. When your word is known to be reliable, others trust you with information and opportunities they would never share with deceptive men. When your actions consistently reflect your principles, enemies cannot predict your behavior by assuming you will choose whatever seems most advantageous in the moment. The honorable warrior becomes unpredictable to dishonorable opponents because they cannot imagine someone consistently choosing principle over convenience. They expect betrayal when loyalty would be inconvenient, expect lies when truth would be costly, expect cowardice when courage would be dangerous. This expectation of dishonorable behavior creates openings that the honorable warrior can exploit. But more importantly, honor provides an unshakable foundation for all other warrior qualities. Courage without honor becomes reckless aggression. Skill without honor becomes mere violence. Strength without honor becomes oppression. When honor guides all other capabilities, they serve constructive rather than destructive purposes. The scroll contains principles that initially seemed to limit my options. Protect the innocent. Keep your word even when costly. Speak truth, even when lies would serve you better. Show mercy to defeated enemies. Respect worthy opponents regardless of their social status. At first, these principles felt like chains restricting my freedom to pursue victory by any means necessary. Over time, I realized that these apparent restrictions were actually sources of power. When you consistently protect the innocent, you earn their support and information. When you reliably keep your word, others seek you as an ally and partner. When you speak truth consistently, your words carry weight that liars' words never achieve. When you show mercy to defeated enemies, you sometimes transform them into allies. I learned that honor is not weakness disguised as virtue. It is strength disciplined by wisdom. The warrior who can destroy but chooses to protect, who can lie but chooses truth, who can betray but chooses loyalty, demonstrates greater power than the warrior who lacks these options. True strength lies in having the capability for dishonorable action, but consistently choosing honor instead. This principle taught me to evaluate my actions not just by their immediate results, but by their effect on my character and reputation. Over time, a victory achieved through deception might solve a short-term problem while creating long-term disadvantages. An honorable defeat might cost immediate gain while building the foundation for future success. The scroll reminds me that honor is not relative to circumstances. It is absolute regardless of what others do. The warrior who abandons honor because his enemies are dishonorable has already been defeated by them. The warrior who maintains honor despite others' dishonor proves his superiority in the most fundamental way. When you build your warrior path on the foundation of honor, you create something that cannot be taken from you by defeat, destroyed by enemies, or diminished by time. Your reputation may suffer temporary damage. Your body may be wounded. Your possessions may be lost. But your honor remains intact as long as you continue to choose right action. The honorable warrior sleeps peacefully because he has no shameful secrets to hide. He faces enemies confidently because he has given them no legitimate grievances to fuel their hatred. He inspires others naturally because they see in him the kind of person they aspire to become. The 10th and final core principle of the undefeated warrior is continuous learning and growth, understanding that mastery is not a destination you reach, but a path you walk for your entire life. I carry with me a pair of worn traveling sandals that have walked thousands of miles in pursuit of knowledge, reminding me that the warrior's education never ends. These sandals have carried me to remote monasteries where monks taught meditation, techniques that enhanced my mental discipline, to carpenter workshops where craftsmen showed me precision that improved my swordwork, to merchant districts where traders revealed negotiation strategies that served me in difficult encounters. They represent my commitment to learning from anyone who possesses knowledge I lack, regardless of their social status or apparent connection to the warrior's path. In my early years, I believed that reaching a certain level of skill would mark my completion as a warrior. I thought that mastering the sword, winning a specific number of duels, or defeating particular opponents would prove that my development was finished. This belief nearly ended my growth before it truly began. The awakening came when I encountered an old farmer who had never held a sword in combat, yet who taught me principles of timing and rhythm that revolutionized my fighting style. By observing how he planted and harvested according to natural cycles, how he worked with weather patterns rather than fighting them, how he achieved maximum results through minimal effort, I learned lessons that no swordmaster had been able to convey. That encounter shattered my narrow definition of what constituted valuable learning. I realized that the universe is constantly teaching, but only the student who maintains beginner's mind can continue receiving its lessons. The moment you believe you know enough, you close yourself off from the infinite knowledge that surrounds you. The traveling sandals taught me that learning requires humility, the willingness to acknowledge ignorance, to ask questions that might seem foolish, to practice basics that masters supposedly don't need to review. I discovered that the higher my skill level became, the more important it was to maintain this humble, learning attitude. I began studying everything, not just martial arts. I learned poetry because it taught economy of expression that made my movements more efficient. I studied mathematics because it revealed patterns that improved my strategic thinking. I practiced calligraphy because it developed the precise hand control that enhanced my sword technique. I observed animals because their natural movements contained principles of efficiency and effectiveness that humans had forgotten. Each new area of study revealed connections to the warrior's path that I had never suspected. The potter's understanding of clay taught me about adapting to resistance. The musician's knowledge of harmony showed me how to blend multiple fighting techniques into seamless combinations. The philosopher's logical methods helped me analyze opponents' strategies more clearly. The sandals also taught me that true learning requires testing knowledge through application. It is not enough to understand principles intellectually. You must try them in practice, fail with them, adjust them, succeed with them, and integrate them into your personal approach. The warrior who collects techniques without testing them is like a man who hoards tools he has never used. I developed the practice of treating every encounter as a learning opportunity. Each duel taught me something about my opponent's schools, about my own remaining weaknesses, about techniques I had not yet mastered. Each conversation revealed insights about human nature that could serve me in future conflicts. Each observation of natural phenomena showed me principles that could be applied to combat. But perhaps most importantly, I learned that the greatest obstacle to continued learning is the ego's need to appear knowledgeable. The warrior who cannot bear to seem ignorant, who cannot ask for help, who cannot admit mistakes, cuts himself off from the very feedback that could accelerate his development. Pride is the enemy of progress. The worn sandals remind me that mastery is paradoxical. The more you truly know, the more you realize how much you don't know. The novice thinks the warrior's path is short and simple. The intermediate student believes mastery is just beyond his current level. The true master understands that every answer reveals new questions. Every achievement opens new possibilities for growth. I learned to seek out teachers wherever they could be found. Sometimes they were renowned masters who could refine my advanced techniques. Sometimes they were beginners whose fresh perspective revealed assumptions I had stopped questioning. Sometimes they were opponents who showed me weaknesses I had not recognized. Sometimes they were children whose natural movement contained principles I had complicated through overthinking. The continuous learner develops what I call absorption mind, the ability to extract useful knowledge from any experience, any person, any situation. This mental stance transforms every day into a classroom, every challenge into curriculum, every setback into education. The warrior with absorption mind never wastes his time because every moment offers some lesson for those prepared to receive. This principle taught me that stagnation is the true enemy of the undefeated warrior. The fighter who stops learning becomes predictable. The strategist who stops studying becomes outdated. The leader who stops growing becomes irrelevant. In a world that constantly changes, only those who continue adapting and learning can maintain their effectiveness. The traveling sandals have taught me that the warrior's journey has no final destination because there is always another level of understanding to reach, another skill to develop, another weakness to address, another opportunity to grow. This endless nature of the path is not frustrating. It is liberating. It means that no matter how much you have accomplished, new adventures in learning await you. When you embrace continuous learning as a fundamental principle, you become ageless in the most important sense. Your body may grow older, but your capabilities continue expanding. Your experience deepens, your wisdom increases, your effectiveness grows, even as physical powers may decline. The learning warrior grows stronger with time rather than weaker. Now that you understand the 10 principles that forge the undefeated warrior's mindset, you must learn how to integrate them into daily practice. Knowledge without application is merely philosophy. Power comes from transforming wisdom into habitual action. I will share with you the sacred training grounds of my daily routine, the practices that maintained my edge through decades of challenge and conflict. My dawn training grounds were not elaborate, a simple clearing where I could move freely, see the horizon clearly, and connect with the natural rhythm that governs all life. This space became sacred not through ceremony, but through consistency. Every morning for years, regardless of weather, location, or circumstances, I began my day in communion with the warrior principles that guided my path. The warrior's day must begin before the world awakens, in the quiet hours when distractions are minimal and your mind is clear from sleep's renewal. I rose each morning while darkness still held the sky, using the pre-dawn silence to center myself and set my intention for the hours ahead. This early rising was not punishment. it was privilege, claiming the day's first and finest energy for my most important work. My morning practice followed a specific sequence designed to awaken body, sharpen mind, and align spirit with warrior purpose. I began with stillness, not the passive rest of sleep, but the active awareness of meditation. Sitting in perfect posture, I would review the 10 principles, examining how each applied to the challenges I expected to face that day. During this meditation, I practiced what I call principle breathing, with each inhalation drawing in the energy to embody one of the warrior qualities, with each exhalation releasing any thoughts or emotions that would interfere with clear action. This was not mystical fantasy, but practical preparation, programming my mind to default to warrior responses rather than reactive impulses. After mental preparation came physical awakening. I began each day with movements that reminded my body of its capabilities, stretching that maintained flexibility, exercises that preserved strength, forms that kept my techniques sharp. But these were not merely physical drills. Each movement was performed with conscious attention to the principles it embodied. When practicing sword forms, I focused not just on technical precision, but on demonstrating the principles through motion. Each strike embodied decisive action. Each defense showed adaptive flow. Each stance reflected perfect timing. Each sequence integrated strategic thinking with immediate execution. Physical practice became a moving meditation on warrior principles. I incorporated what I called challenge-seeking into every day, deliberately choosing the more difficult path when easier alternatives presented themselves. Taking the steeper trail when traveling, carrying heavier loads when working, engaging the more challenging opponent when training. These small daily choices built the mental habit of embracing difficulty rather than avoiding it. Throughout each day, I practiced momentitude awareness, constantly asking myself which of the 10 principles the current situation called for. Was this a time for adaptive, water-like thinking or decisive, lightning-like action? Did the circumstances require strategic patience or tactical aggression? This continuous application kept the principles alive and accessible rather than abstract. Concepts I established daily non-negotiables, practices I would complete regardless of external circumstances. Physical training could not be skipped due to bad weather. Mental discipline could not be postponed for social obligations. Character development could not be delayed for immediate conveniences. These commitments created an unshakable foundation that supported all other activities. Each evening, I conducted what I called day review, a systematic examination of how well I had embodied warrior principles in that day's challenges. Where had I acted from strength versus weakness? When had I chosen principle over convenience? What opportunities for growth had I seized or missed? This daily accounting kept me honest about my progress and highlighted areas needing attention. Practiced difficult conversations daily, deliberately engaging in interactions that required courage, honesty, or compassion. Whether correcting someone's mistake, expressing unpopular truths, or offering help to those who might reject it, I sought opportunities to strengthen my character through real-world application of warrior values. The warrior's daily practice must include study beyond martial techniques. I read constantly military histories, philosophical texts, poetry, technical manuals, always seeking principles that could enhance my understanding of the warrior's path. I studied human nature through observation, watching how people responded to stress, success, failure, and conflict. I maintained what I called readiness practice, staying constantly prepared for unexpected challenges. This meant keeping my equipment maintained, my skills sharp, my mind alert, my body capable. Not from paranoia, but from respect for the unpredictable nature of life and commitment to meeting whatever arose with full capability. Each day included service practice, finding ways to use my warrior capabilities in service of something greater than myself. Whether protecting the weak, teaching the willing, or simply setting an example of what dedicated practice could accomplish, I sought to make my development beneficial to others, rather than purely selfish. The daily practice also included failure integration, deliberately, reflecting on mistakes, setbacks, and defeats to extract their lessons. I kept a mental inventory of every technique that had failed, every strategy that had backfired, every assumption that had proven wrong. This catalog of failures became a map of areas requiring improvement. I practiced ordinary excellence, bringing warrior-level attention and capability to mundane tasks, whether preparing food, maintaining equipment, or handling routine communications. I approached every activity as an opportunity to demonstrate and develop the precision, patience, and quality that characterized true mastery. The key to sustainable, daily practice is understanding that consistency matters more than intensity. Small daily improvements compound into extraordinary capabilities over time, while sporadic periods of intense effort followed by neglect produce little lasting change. The warrior builds his strength through daily deposits in the account of his capabilities. Your daily practice must be designed for your specific circumstances, but it must include all 10 principles. Find ways to exercise self-knowledge, embrace uncertainty, practice timing, develop adaptability, make decisive commitments, strengthen discipline, face fears, think strategically, act honorably, and continue learning every single day. When daily practice becomes as natural as breathing, you will discover that warrior consciousness is not something you put on for special occasions. It becomes who you are in every moment of every day. There will come times in your warrior journey when you must face battles that test every principle you have learned, every skill you have developed, every fiber of strength you possess. These greatest battles leave their mark on you forever, not just in the scars they create, but in the character they forge. Each mark on my body tells the story of a lesson learned through the crucible of ultimate challenge. This map of scars is not decoration. It is curriculum written in flesh and blood. The long mark across my shoulder reminds me of the day I learned that reputation means nothing when facing a truly skilled opponent. The jagged line on my forearm teaches me still about the cost of overconfidence. The deep indent near my ribs whispers constantly about the importance of strategic patience over tactical aggression. Your greatest battles will not always be physical confrontations with sword and steel. They may be conflicts with your own limitations, struggles against circumstances that seem impossible to overcome, confrontations with enemies who possess every apparent advantage. But the principles that guide you through mortal combat also guide you through these other ultimate tests. The most dangerous opponent you will ever face is not the skilled swordsman or the cunning strategist. It is yourself when fear, doubt, and desperation drive you to abandon everything you have learned. In my most challenging battles, my greatest enemy was always the voice in my own mind suggesting shortcuts, compromises, and retreats from the warrior's path. I remember the night before my duel with Sasaki Kojiro, lying sleepless and wrestling with every fear that had ever haunted me. He was younger, faster, had longer reach, and commanded techniques I had never encountered. Logic suggested that facing him was foolish, that retreat would be wisdom, that preserving my life mattered more than preserving my reputation. The internal battle that night was fiercer than our physical encounter the next day. But that sleepless struggle taught me the most important lesson about facing ultimate challenges. You must never fight your fears and doubts. You must transform them into allies. Instead of trying to convince myself I wasn't afraid, I accepted the fear completely and asked what it could teach me. Instead of denying my disadvantages, I studied them to find ways they might become strengths. When facing your greatest battles, preparation becomes sacred duty. You cannot rely on improvisation when everything is at stake. Every aspect of your capability, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, must be honed to its finest edge. But this preparation must be balanced with acceptance that no amount of preparation can eliminate all uncertainty. The scar near my heart reminds me of the battle where I learned that your greatest challenges often arrive when you feel least prepared. For them, life does not schedule its ultimate tests for your convenience. The warrior must be ready to face the impossible with whatever resources are currently available, rather than waiting for ideal conditions that may never come. I discovered that in the most crucial moments, all complex strategies reduce to simple fundamentals. When facing mortal danger, you cannot rely on elaborate techniques you have practiced only in safe conditions. You must depend on the basic principles that have become so deeply ingrained. They function without conscious thought. This is why daily practice of fundamentals matters more than collecting advanced techniques. Your greatest battles will test not just your skills, but your character. Will you maintain honor when honor seems disadvantageous? Will you show mercy when cruelty appears safer? Will you tell truth when lies would better serve your immediate interests? These character challenges are often more difficult than physical ones because they require you to choose principle over survival instinct. The mark on my left temple teaches me about the moment when everything I thought I knew proved inadequate. In the midst of a battle that was going badly, I realized that all my preparation had been based on assumptions about how the conflict would unfold. When reality differed from expectation, I had to abandon my entire plan and fight from pure warrior instinct. This experience taught me that facing greatest battles requires what I call plan abandonment courage, the willingness to discard strategies that are not working, even when you have no clear alternative. Sometimes the warrior must leap into the void of complete uncertainty, trusting that his training will provide answers as circumstances unfold. I learned that your greatest battles often become greatest victories, not because you overpower your opponents, but because you discover capabilities you never knew you possessed. Extreme pressure reveals reserves of strength, speed, intelligence, and determination that cannot be accessed under normal circumstances. The warrior who has never been tested to his absolute limits does not know what his limits actually are. The deepest scar running along my ribs reminds me of the battle where I learned that losing with honor creates more strength than winning through compromise. Sometimes your greatest battle is not about achieving victory, but about maintaining your warrior integrity while facing inevitable defeat. How you lose reveals more about your character than how you win. When facing ultimate challenges, you must remember that courage is not the absence of fear. It is action in alignment with your principles despite overwhelming fear. The warrior who claims to feel no fear when facing mortal danger is either lying or damaged. True courage means feeling the terror completely while refusing to let it control your choices. Your greatest battles will also teach you about the power of acceptance. There comes a moment in every ultimate challenge when you must accept that the outcome is beyond your complete control. You can influence the result through your choices and actions, but you cannot guarantee it. Paradoxically, this acceptance often provides the freedom necessary to perform at your highest level. I learned that in greatest battles, time moves differently. Seconds stretch into eternities, allowing you to see opportunities that would be invisible under normal circumstances. This expanded time perception is a gift of extreme focus, and learning to access it can transform apparently hopeless situations into victories. The scars on my hands remind me that greatest battles always cost something. Even victory comes with a price, energy expended, risks taken, innocence lost. The warrior who expects to emerge from ultimate challenges unchanged is naive. You will be transformed by fire, and you must be prepared to accept whatever form that transformation takes. When you face your greatest battles, remember that they are not punishments, they are promotions. Life only presents you with challenges you have developed the capability to handle. Your ultimate tests are evidence that You have grown strong enough to be worthy of them. The ultimate goal of warrior development is building a mind that cannot be broken, a spirit that cannot be defeated, a core of strength that remains intact regardless of external circumstances. This unshakable mental fortitude is not built through single acts of heroism, but through countless hours of patient cultivation using practices that forge an unbreakable warrior consciousness. My meditation stone is nothing special to look at, a simple river rock worn smooth by water and handling. Yet this ordinary stone has anchored thousands of hours of mental training, serving as the foundation for developing the kind of inner strength that no enemy can touch, no setback can diminish, no victory can corrupt. It represents the quiet, persistent work that creates extraordinary inner power. Mental fortitude is not the same as stubbornness or rigid thinking. The unshakable mind is actually supremely flexible, able to adapt to any circumstance while maintaining its essential nature. Like the meditation stone that remains solid while water flows around it, the fortified mind stays centered while chaos swirls in every direction. In my early years, I confused mental toughness with emotional suppression. I thought that becoming unbreakable meant feeling nothing, that strength required cutting myself off from fear, doubt, pain, and uncertainty. This approach created a brittle kind of toughness that shattered when subjected to enough pressure. True mental fortitude includes all emotions while being controlled by none of them. The foundation of unshakable mental strength is what I call reality acceptance, the willingness to see things exactly as they are rather than as you wish they were or fear they might become. This requires developing the discipline to face unpleasant truths without denial, to acknowledge limitations without despair, to recognize threats without panic. I learned to practice this acceptance through daily meditation with the stone. Each morning, I would sit in perfect stillness and examine my current situation with complete honesty. What challenges was I facing? What fears was I carrying? What weaknesses needed attention? What strengths could I rely upon? This daily inventory built the habit of clear seeing that serves the warrior in crisis. Mental fortitude also requires developing what I call outcome independence, the ability to perform at your highest level, regardless of whether you achieve your desired results. This doesn't mean you stop caring about outcomes, but that your effort and commitment remain constant whether you're winning or losing, succeeding or failing, being praised or criticized. The meditation stone taught me that true strength comes from connecting with something larger than your personal fears and desires. When your identity is rooted only in your achievements, setbacks become identity threats. When your worth depends on others' opinions, criticism becomes devastating. But when you connect with timeless principles and eternal values, temporary circumstances lose their power to shake you. I developed practices for strengthening mental resilience under pressure. I would meditate during storms, maintaining perfect inner stillness while wind and rain raged around me. I would practice sword forms while hungry, tired, or in pain, learning to access peak performance despite physical discomfort. I would solve complex problems while deliberately creating mental distractions, building the ability to think clearly under stress. The unshakable mind also requires developing immunity to what I call external validation addiction, the need for others' approval, recognition, or encouragement to maintain your effort and confidence. While appreciation from worthy sources is pleasant, the warrior cannot depend on it. Your inner fire must burn steadily regardless of whether others acknowledge its heat. I learned to practice worst-case acceptance, regularly contemplating as the most challenging scenarios I might face, and mentally rehearsing how I would respond with warrior integrity intact. This was not pessimistic thinking, but realistic preparation. By accepting in advance that difficult times would come, I removed their power to surprise and overwhelm me. Mental fortitude includes developing what I call failure immunity, the understanding that setbacks are information, not verdicts on your worth. Every defeat teaches valuable lessons if you're strong enough to learn from it rather than being crushed by it. Every mistake reveals areas for improvement if you're wise enough to study it rather than simply regret it. The meditation stone reminds me that building unshakable strength requires patience with the process. Just as the stone was shaped gradually by countless interactions with flowing water, mental fortitude develops through countless small practices, each one adding almost imperceptible strength to your inner foundation. You cannot rush this development any more than you can rush the formation of mountains. I discovered that mental strength grows through voluntary exposure to controlled difficulty. Just as muscles grow stronger by lifting progressively heavier weights, the mind grows more resilient by successfully handling progressively greater challenges. This requires deliberately seeking out situations that test your composure, patience, courage, and determination. The strongest mental fortress is built on a foundation of self-knowledge, reinforced with walls of disciplined practice, protected by gates of principled decision-making, and powered by the energy of purpose larger than personal comfort. When these elements combine, you create an inner citadel that remains inviolate, regardless of external attacks. True mental fortitude also includes the wisdom to know when flexibility serves better than rigidity. The unshakable warrior is not stubborn about methods, only about values. He can change his approach, modify his tactics, even retreat from positions when necessary, all while maintaining absolute commitment to his core principles. I learned that the unbreakable mind is paradoxically both harder and softer than ordinary consciousness. Harder in that it cannot be bent by pressure, manipulation, or threat. Softer in that it responds appropriately to every situation, without the brittleness that comes from rigid expectations or fragile pride. When you build true mental fortitude, you become like the meditation stone itself. Small disturbances flow around you without effect. Major turbulence may move you, but cannot break you. And over time, the very challenges that sought to wear you down only polish you to greater smoothness and strength. The unshakable warrior mind is not built in a day, a month, or even a year. It is the work of a lifetime, requiring patient cultivation of inner strength through daily practice, conscious choice, and unwavering commitment to growth. But once built, it becomes your greatest weapon and your most reliable ally in every battle life presents. The path of the undefeated warrior might seem solitary, but in truth, the strongest warriors are those who understand how to build and maintain powerful relationships and alliances. The brotherhood seal I carry bears the mark shared among warriors who have proven themselves worthy of absolute trust, a reminder that even the most self-reliant warrior is strengthened by bonds with others who walk the same demanding path. This seal was earned through years of proving myself to warriors whose standards were as uncompromising as my own. It was not granted because of my skill with the sword or my victories in combat, but because I had demonstrated the qualities that make a man worthy of brotherhood: loyalty that endures hardship, honesty that accepts no compromise, courage that can be relied upon when others falter. In my youth, I believed that the warrior's path required complete independence, that needing others was weakness, that the strongest warriors stood alone. This understanding was not entirely wrong. The warrior must indeed be capable of standing alone when necessary. But complete isolation is not strength. It is limitation that prevents you from achieving what you could accomplish with worthy allies. The transformation in my thinking came when I witnessed a group of ordinary warriors defeat a superior opponent through perfect coordination. None of them individually possessed the skill to challenge this master, but their combined efforts, perfectly synchronized and mutually supporting, overwhelmed him completely. I realized that day that multiplication of force through alliance could achieve what individual excellence could not. But forming alliances is not simply a matter of collecting useful contacts or building networks for personal advantage. The warrior's approach to relationships must be grounded in the same principles that guide all aspects of the warrior's path. Honor, courage, honesty, and commitment must characterize every alliance, or those relationships become sources of weakness. Rather than strength, the Brotherhood seal taught me to distinguish between allies and true brothers. Allies are those who share temporary interests, who cooperate when cooperation serves their purposes, who support you when support costs them little. Brothers are those who share permanent values, who stand with you when standing is costly, who support you especially when you cannot support yourself. True brotherhood among warriors is forged through shared trials that reveal character under pressure. It cannot be created through ceremony or declared through words. It must be earned through actions that prove each member's worthiness. The seal I carry represents not just membership in a group, but evidence that I have been tested and found reliable by those whose judgment I respect. I learned that the warrior's leadership differs fundamentally from the leadership sought by politicians or merchants. The warrior leads not through position or authority, but through example and competence. Others follow the warrior leader not because they must, but because they trust his judgment, respect his character, and believe in his commitment to purposes greater than personal gain. The most powerful form of warrior influence is what I call inspiration through demonstration, showing others what becomes possible when someone commits fully to the warrior's path. When others see your discipline, your courage, your integrity, your effectiveness, they begin to desire those qualities for themselves. This creates a natural following based on genuine respect rather than artificial authority. But warrior relationships also require the wisdom to recognize when alliances have outlived their usefulness or when supposed allies have compromised their integrity. The warrior who maintains loyalty to unworthy companions out of misplaced sentiment endangers not only himself, but all his other relationships. Sometimes the most difficult warrior decision is choosing to sever bonds that have become corrupted. I developed principles for evaluating potential allies. Do they keep their word even when it costs them? Do they tell truth even when lies would serve them better? Do they show courage when courage is needed? Do they remain loyal during difficult times? Do they place principles above convenience? These standards may seem harsh, but the warrior cannot afford relationships built on weaker foundations. The Brotherhood seal also reminds me that true warrior relationships are reciprocal. Just as you evaluate others' worthiness, you must continuously prove your own worthiness to them. The moment you begin taking loyal allies for granted, expecting support without offering it in return, or compromising the standards that earned their respect, you begin destroying the very relationships that strengthen you. I learned that the warrior must be capable of both leading and following, depending on circumstances. Sometimes your expertise and experience make you the natural leader. Sometimes others possess knowledge or capabilities that make them better suited to lead specific endeavors. The warrior's ego must never prevent him from following worthy leaders, or from accepting guidance from those with superior understanding. Warrior relationships also extend beyond other warriors to include all those whose paths intersect with yours. The merchant who deals honestly, the craftsman who works with integrity, the teacher who shares knowledge generously, the servant who performs duties faithfully, all of these can become valuable allies if you treat them with the respect their character deserves. The seal teaches me that loyalty must be earned before it is given, but once earned, it must be maintained absolutely. The warrior who proves disloyal even once, regardless of circumstances or justifications, destroys not only that specific relationship, but his reputation for trustworthiness among all who know of his betrayal. I discovered that the strongest alliances are those built around shared missions rather than shared interests. Interests change as circumstances change, but missions rooted in unchanging principles create bonds that endure through all transformations. When warriors unite around purposes larger than themselves, they create relationships that strengthen under pressure rather than weakening. The warrior's approach to building relationships requires patience and selectivity. It is better to have few allies of unshakable integrity than many allies of questionable character. Quality of relationship matters far more than quantity, because in moments of greatest trial, you need people you can depend upon absolutely, not people who might abandon you when loyalty becomes inconvenient. When you master the art of warrior relationships, you multiply your capabilities exponentially. Your allies' strengths become available to you. Your weaknesses are covered by their capabilities. Your wisdom is enhanced by their perspectives. Your courage is amplified by their support. The brotherhood of true warriors becomes a force that no solitary opponent, however skilled, can overcome. The true measure of a warrior's life is not found in the battles he won or the opponents he defeated, but in the legacy he leaves. The warriors he inspired, the principles he passed on, the positive change he created in the world. The teaching scroll I carry contains the wisdom I hope will outlive my physical form, reminding me that the greatest victory is creating something that continues fighting for justice long after the warrior himself has fallen. This scroll represents my attempt to distill decades of learning, struggle, and growth into principles that future warriors can use to forge their own paths to strength and honor. Writing it forced me to examine my entire journey, to separate what was universally valuable from what was merely personal preference, to find words that could transmit not just techniques, but the spirit that gives those techniques life. In my later years, I began to understand that accumulating personal power and skill was only the first phase of the warrior's journey. The second phase, the one that determines whether your life truly mattered, involves using what you have developed in service of something greater than yourself. This shift from selfish to selfless motivation marks the transition from warrior to master. The scroll taught me that teaching is not just sharing information. It is planting seeds of transformation in fertile minds and then providing the cultivation. Those seeds require to grow into their full potential. Every student who truly understands and applies what you teach multiplies your impact on the world. Through them, your influence continues long after your personal battles have ended. But not everyone who seeks instruction is ready to receive it. I learned to recognize the qualities that mark a worthy student: genuine humility, despite whatever skills they already possess, willingness to endure difficulty in pursuit of growth, commitment to applying what they learn rather than just collecting knowledge, and most importantly, the desire to use their development in service of principles larger than personal advancement. Teaching forced me to understand my own methods more deeply than I ever had while simply practicing them. When a student struggled with a concept I found natural, I had to examine why it was natural to me, how I had originally learned it, what obstacles I had overcome in mastering it. This process of breaking down intuitive knowledge into transmissible lessons strengthened my own understanding immeasurably. The scroll reminds me that legacy is not just about formal teaching relationships. Every interaction you have, every choice you make, every example you set influences others in ways you may never know. The merchant who sees you deal honestly even when honesty costs you profit may choose honesty in his own difficult moment. The young person who witnesses your courage in defending the weak may find their own courage when they face similar circumstances. I discovered that the most powerful form of teaching is demonstration through living. When others see someone consistently embodying warrior principles, maintaining discipline when discipline is difficult, showing courage when courage is dangerous, acting honorably when honor is costly, they begin to believe that such living is possible for them as well. Writing. The teaching scroll also taught me about the responsibility that comes with influence. Every person you inspire to pursue the warrior's path will face dangers, difficulties, and moral challenges, partly because of your influence. You become partially responsible for ensuring they have the wisdom and strength to handle what that path demands. This responsibility must be taken seriously. The legacy-minded warrior also understands that destructive examples are as influential as constructive ones. If you claim to follow warrior principles but compromise them when following them becomes inconvenient. You teach others that these principles are optional guidelines rather than unbreakable commitments. Your failures of integrity damage not just your own character but the faith others place in the warrior's path itself. I learned that true legacy transcends any individual student or teaching relationship. When you consistently embody warrior principles, you strengthen those principles in the world, making it easier for others to recognize their value and choose to follow them. When you demonstrate that honor, courage, and discipline lead to genuine strength and effectiveness, you prove that these ancient values remain relevant in any era. The scroll taught me to think in terms of generations rather than years. The student you teach today may become the teacher who inspires the master who changes the world tomorrow. Your direct influence may seem limited, but its indirect effects can be enormous. This long-term perspective changes how you approach every teaching opportunity and every example you set. Creating worthy legacy also requires accepting that you cannot control how others interpret or apply what you teach. Some students will misunderstand despite your best efforts. Others will use what they learn for purposes you would not approve. Still others will improve upon your methods and surpass your achievements. The legacy-minded warrior finds joy in all these outcomes because they all represent the living growth of what you have planted. I discovered that the process of preparing to leave a legacy transforms you in unexpected ways. When you begin thinking seriously about what you want to pass on, you become more intentional about developing those qualities in yourself. When you consider how your actions today will influence unknown people in distant futures, you choose more carefully and act more thoughtfully. The teaching scroll reminds me that warrior legacy is not about building monuments to yourself. It is about contributing to the eternal struggle between courage and cowardice, honor and corruption, strength and weakness. Every warrior who develops genuine character and capability strengthens the forces of light in this ongoing battle. Your legacy will ultimately be measured not by what you achieved for yourself, but by what you made possible for others. Did you inspire courage in the fearful? Did you teach strength to the weak? Did you show honor to the confused? Did you demonstrate that the warrior's path leads to genuine power and meaningful life? When you approach your final battles, knowing that you have passed on everything valuable you learned, that you have inspired others to continue growing beyond where you could go, that you have contributed to making the world more honorable and strong, you can face whatever comes with the deepest satisfaction a warrior can know, the knowledge that your life created lasting value that will continue fighting for justice long after you are gone. As I near the end of my time in this world, I have come to understand the most profound truth about the warrior's path. It has no ending. The endless path stone I carry bears no inscriptions marking distance traveled or destination reached, because the journey of warrior development continues beyond the boundaries of any single lifetime. What we build in ourselves becomes part of the eternal current of strength that flows through all generations. This simple milestone marker was placed on a mountain path by some unknown traveler centuries before my birth. It bears no name, claims no achievement, promises no reward for reaching it. Yet it has guided countless feet along treacherous trails, providing reference and encouragement to all who sought to climb higher. It reminds me that the warrior's greatest achievement is not reaching some final summit, but becoming a reliable guide for those who follow. Throughout these reflections, I have shared with you 10 fundamental principles, dozens of practices, countless lessons learned through decades of struggle and growth. But all of this wisdom can be distilled into one essential understanding. The undefeated warrior is not the one who never falls, but the one who rises from every fall stronger, wiser, and more committed to the path of honor and strength. You may have begun reading this believing that warrior development was about learning to win battles, to overcome opponents, to achieve dominance over challenging circumstances. By now, I hope you understand that these external victories are merely the natural expression of something far more important, the internal transformation that occurs when someone commits totally to becoming the best version of themselves. The path I have described demands everything you have to give. 2. It requires you to face truths about yourself that most people avoid their entire lives. It demands that you choose difficulty over comfort, principle over convenience, long-term growth over short-term pleasure. It asks you to risk failure, embrace uncertainty, and persist through defeats that would break lesser spirits. But what this path gives in return is worth every sacrifice it demands. It gives you the unshakable knowledge that you can handle whatever life presents. It provides the deep satisfaction that comes from living according to principles you genuinely respect. It offers the peace that flows from alignment between your values and your actions. Most importantly, it grants you the privilege of becoming someone worthy of your own respect. The endless pathstone reminds me that mastery is not a destination. It is a way of traveling. There will always be new challenges to face, new skills to develop, new weaknesses to address, new opportunities to serve something greater than yourself. This eternal quality of the warrior's journey is not frustrating. It is liberating. It means that no matter what you have achieved or failed to achieve, new possibilities for growth await you. Some of you reading this are young, filled with energy and ambition, eager to prove yourselves against the world's challenges. Others are older, perhaps feeling that your time for warrior development has passed, that the physical demands of the path are beyond your current capabilities. Let me tell you clearly, the warrior's path adapts to every stage of life, and the qualities it develops, courage, wisdom, integrity, discipline, can be cultivated at any age. The young warrior focuses on building physical capabilities, testing himself against external opponents, establishing his place in the world through demonstrations of skill and courage. The mature warrior emphasizes developing wisdom, serving as mentor and guide, contributing to purposes larger than personal advancement. Both phases are essential, and both offer their own forms of satisfaction and accomplishment. What matters is not where you begin this journey, but that you begin it. Every day you delay starting is a day of potential strength lost forever. Every moment you spend making excuses for why you cannot live up to warrior standards is a moment stolen from the process of actually developing those standards in yourself. The Pathstone also teaches me that the warrior's journey, while demanding individual commitment, is not meant to be walked alone. Seek out others who share your commitment to growth, honor, and strength. Learn from those who have traveled further than you. Teach those who are just beginning their own development. Build alliances with people whose character you respect and whose purposes align with your own. Remember that setbacks are not evidence of failure. They are curriculum in the University of Warrior Development. Every defeat teaches lessons that victory cannot provide. Every mistake reveals weaknesses that success would leave hidden. Every challenge that pushes you beyond your current limits expands your future capabilities. As you walk this path, you will discover that the undefeated mindset is not about winning every battle. It is about remaining true to warrior principles. Regardless of external outcomes, you defeat yourself only when you abandon the values and practices that define your character. As long as you continue growing, learning, and embodying warrior qualities, you remain undefeated in the most important sense. The endless pathstone will outlast my body, your body, and the bodies of countless future generations. But the principles. It represents the commitment to continuous growth, the dedication to honorable living, the courage to face whatever challenges arise. These are truly eternal. They existed before we were born and will continue long after we are gone. Your task is not to complete the warrior's journey. That is impossible. Your task is to walk it with such integrity, such commitment, such courage that you become part of the eternal current of strength that inspires others to begin their own development. You become a pathstone yourself, marking the way for those who will follow. The mindset of the undefeated warrior is now yours to claim, not because I have given it to you, but because you have earned it through your willingness to undertake this demanding path. Take what you have learned and make it living reality through daily practice, consistent choice, and unwavering commitment to becoming worthy of your highest aspirations. The path continues. Walk it well.